You wake before the sun because the stink wakes you, because the wet straw under your cheek is colder than the air above it, because a rat shoulders through the thatch and skitters along the rafter as if it owns the roof, and in a way it does. Your breath fogs the crowded dark. Someone's elbow digs your ribs. A baby wheezes. A hen mutters. The fire that was supposed to keep the smoke thick enough to numb the fleas has gone to breathless ash, so the fleas are cheering and feasting. You pull your cloak, really a tired scrap of wool that smells like yesterday's smoke and last week's pig, over your shoulders and listen for the first sound you can trust. The river heaving itself along beyond the lanes, steady as a giant's breathing. You reach for your tunic and it reaches back, crunchy where salt dried and soft where grease never did. Every stitch itches like a whispering mouth. Your toes find the floor and immediately find what someone spilled in the night. You do not ask. There is a pot for that, and the pot is full, and your cousin swears they will empty it, and your cousin lies as easily as they breathe. The latch sulks, the bar complains, wood swells when it rains, and it always rains, fog drifting up from the river like a debt collector. You lean into the swollen door with the patience of a saint and the language of a dockhand until it gives, and the lane breathes on you, cold, damp, alive. Your first step is a negotiation with gravity and slime. The cobbles remember 100,000 heels, polished by mud, tears, and spilled ale. Above you a shutter snaps open, and a voice sings the warning that is both custom and conscience. Mind the loo. Then the slop falls. It lands where slop lands. You do not look up. You have learned not to look up. You sidestep, feel the warm splash kiss your ankle, and keep moving because your belly is a tight fist. And breakfast is a promise you have to earn. The slum wakes the way a sick animal wakes, with twitches and teeth. Doors yawn. Smoke snags on the beams that bridge the alley overhead, because the houses lean together like two men sharing a secret they would never write down. A pig, busy auditioning for the part of landlord, noses into a garbage heap and squeals the opening note of a quarrel with three dogs that have never won a fair fight but do not know the word fair. A woman beats dust out of bedding with a willow switch. Soot snow drifts. A tanner's boy lopes by, shoulders shiny with fat, eyes red from the lime pits, humming a hymn no church would claim. Somewhere a rooster remembers his job and gets the hour wrong with conviction. You do the chores that tie you to breathing. You tilt the chamber pot into the gutter, mumbling the warning because you are not a monster, and the ditch takes it without opinion and hurries it toward the river where the swans pretend not to notice. You coax a sullen coal back to life with splinters shaved from lumber, liberated off a builder's cart after dark. You saw yesterday's loaf, a rye that could patch a roof, and soften a wedge in a ladle of pottage that is mostly onions and faith. You feed a heel to the hen so she remembers why she lives with you, and not the neighbor who swears he makes better soup. You hold the babe long enough for your sister to shake pins into her hair and curse fashion. Then you shoulder your basket with one slat missing, tuck the rag rope you plaited last night under your arm, and go buy yourself a day. Work is whatever the alley will pay for. This morning it is water for the baker, who is short a boy because the last boy burned his hand on a peel and went home to cry and never stopped. The baker's wife meets you with a face like a well-worn glove and a laugh bright as a brass pot. She lays a yoke across your shoulders, ties on 2 sloshing buckets, and calls you blessing, as if saying it might make it true. The well is 2 corners away, in a court where 7 families share 1 rope, and 6 swear the 7th steals water. The 7th swears the well is haunted, and the ghost prefers their bucket. You crank up a pail, pass it hand to hand, and all of you drink the way people drink when the well knows them by name. You pass the beggar whose stump healed badly and made him a prophet of pain. He rattles pebbles in a wooden bowl and tells fortunes no one wants. You drop him a pebble of stale crust, and he blesses you with a thumb stained by something that used to be red. A girl with a shaved head hawks pins she swears were stroked by a saint's sleeve. 2 butchers roll a hog's head with their boots and laugh when a dog drags the tongue. Cruelty and hunger walk arm in arm here. They are cousins who sing the same songs in different keys. You learn to hum with neither. At the market, the world compresses until it thrums. Color shouts, matter and weld, blue that remembers skies it has never seen. Cloth sellers slap their bolts and praise softness with hands that have never been soft. The fishmonger's plank glows wet as a confession. Eyes stare up from silver faces, glass bright and shocked by air. Eels loop in a tub as if writing their own alphabet. The baker's peel flashes like a sunbeam. Round loaves shoulder one another like brothers in a doorway. The tallowman's stall is a low altar to usefulness, his candles thin as promises and twice as necessary. Somewhere a fifer tests a tune, somewhere a priest tests a conscience. You test prices with a stare that says your coins are shy. You trade your rag rope for a heel of cheese that pretends to be a stone. You promise to sweep ash from the bakehouse in exchange for elbow time near the oven later, where you can warm your hands and your bones and your faith at once. You drag a water barrel without spilling more than half, and the baker's wife tips you a mug of small beer with a smile that has learned to live without teeth. The beer is mild as patience. It settles your stomach, the way a hand on your shoulder settles a fight, before fists remember their lines. You wipe your mouth on the back of your hand, and decide the world is bearable for the next 10 minutes. When the church bell mutters the hour, you make for the riverside, because that is where the work smells loudest. Dyer's vats boil a set of bad dreams in public. Piss and alum, matter and woad, tubs that burp like frogs and make the air taste like a coin. Men with blue hands laugh with red teeth. A boy with a basket of mordant slips on something no one can name and rises grinning blue as a bruise. You do not judge. There are worse ways to be colored by your day. You put a shoulder under one end of a sloshing vat so the master can tamp the cloth with a pole. He pays you with 2 coppers warmed by his palm, and advice colder than the river. Don't swallow a dye pot. It dyes you on the inside first. Back through a side court where houses pinch the lane until it whines, a midwife bulldozes through with hands scrubbed raw and eyes that have already seen 3 births before noon. She nods once at you, and you feel taller. In a slum, nods are currency. Eye contact is a blanket. A cat the color of embers strolls along a lintel as if it owns prayer. Someone sings a lullaby in a language that arrived with salt and sails. On a stool by a doorway, an old woman braids tails into thread, selling both to anyone who needs to bind a wound or a worry. You pay her a copper to hear the part where the river tried to marry the town. You forget you are tired and remember you are here. By midday, the sun negotiates a pale treaty with the smoke, and the lane grows noisy with decisions. Men argue over who owns a broken wheel. Women broker peace between 2 geese with ambitions. Children wander in packs, the bold ones carrying long nails as if they were scepters. The beetle struts through pretending to catalog every sin against the bylaw, from pigs too free to hats too fine for their owners, and everyone nods, agrees piously, and keeps doing as they were. You help old Nan, the woman with the best curses, hoist a bucket by her door. She tells you a story you are not old enough to hear, and pays you with the satisfaction of being told it anyway. Food returns like a tax collector. You find the woman with the batter and the pan she keeps oiled with a patience you would bottle if you could. She sells hot rounds of fried dough, 1 copper at a time, salvation that crackles. You hand over a coin, and she flips you a miracle that is too hot to hold and too good to drop. You burn your fingers and lick them clean, and earn the envy of 3 children who plan, with admirable seriousness, how to steal envy as if it were bread. At a table where a man sells herbs that might be medicine or might be hope, you buy a sprig of something sharp and pretend it is for a stew you will certainly make. He says it will keep bad dreams from gnawing your feet. You tuck it into your boot and appreciate the poetry. Along the river stairs, your back learns the weight of other people's thirst. You hoist pails to doorways for folk who swear they would fetch their own, if not for a limp, a prayer, a promise, a little something wrong with the hip, a little something wrong with the soul. You do not judge. You are a future version of everyone you see, and they are a future version of you. The bargemen curse and laugh in the same breath. One tells you a story about a fish that bit a priest and absolved itself. Another says the river is a god who takes his tithes in buttons and boots. You glance at your boots and tie them tighter. Back in the lanes, a fight blooms like mold. 2 men discover their fists are more fluent than their mouths. A crowd arranges itself into a circle because circles are old and comforting. You watch long enough to judge neither will kill the other. Then you watch long enough to see someone decide killing would be cheaper. You move on. You have work to do that involves objects that do not bleed. You stack wood behind the bakehouse because the baker's wife promised you could roast your crusts on the oven's lip if you made the pile taller than your shoulder. You make it taller than your hope, and earn a place near warmth later. Gossip arrives like a levy payable in attention. Rumor says the bridge toll will double before next market. Certainty says the new law against bone dice will be enforced by men who keep dice in their sleeves. Agnes, who sells pies and never blinks, says the watch will sweep through tonight with cudgels for show and knives for proof. Jory, who lifts purses and loses sleep, says a ship from the south brought coughs, and someone down by the quay is spitting rose-colored prayers. You file it all away on a high shelf in your mind where panic cannot reach without a ladder. The afternoon's coin smells worse than the morning's. You join the night soil men though the sun still sits high, because the privies are full and the pits keep their own calendar. You shoulder a yoke with 2 slopping pails and relearn the walk with your arms straight and your head like a boat's prow. Yard to yard, barrel to barrel, excuse to excuse, you go. In one place, a woman bars the way, saying the sun is watching, and she cannot be seen handing her shame to strangers. In another, a man insists on paying you in blessings and breath mints, both of which you accept because coin is not the only currency, and you might need a blessing that smells like mint later. At the edge of the yard, the gardener thanks you like a brother and feeds his cabbages as if feeding a future that might feed you back. You scrub your hands in ash water until the skin squeaks and scour your nails with a shard. The sky begins to bruise toward evening. Bells drowse, shadows yawn. You return the yoke to a wall missing 2 bricks because someone bought soup with one of them last winter. The baker's wife flaps a cloth at you and points to the warm edge of the oven. You thank everything with a face and ease your crusts onto the brick to kiss the heat. You sit on a stool whose legs argue with the earth and let your muscles tell you everything you did today. They do not lie. They never lie. Outside, the street begins its second shift. Hawkers with voices have gone. Hawkers with eyes remain. Candlelight pricks the lane like cautious stars. A fiddler tunes for coin. A woman with bracelets like tin rivers tells fortunes and steals handkerchiefs while you admire her rings. A man sells warm pebbles for pockets to children with no mittens. From a window, a voice reads a letter for a copper to 4 men who will later pretend they can write their names. The watch clatters in. 4 men with lanterns and the confidence of a law they barely know, nodding to saints nailed above doorways and to sins standing beneath them. This is the hour when the lane pretends it is a hearth. People gather where the damp keeps least company. Stories become money and you have a small coin to spend. You tell of the dyer's boy who turned blue and grinned like a saint. Someone else tells of a rat the size of a cat that married a cat and raised terrors in the churchyard. Someone claims a lordling tried to walk here in shoes with silver tips and went home on his toes. Laughter bounces from beam to beam. For a minute there is a community louder than hunger. Not all of the evening is kind. There is the creak of a door that means trouble. There is the quick hush that means the watch has seen something it considers its business. There is the brief, bright sound of a slap, and then the longer, dull sound of men who insist on being men. You move the conversation like furniture, guiding neighbors out of the lane and into laughter again. It is part of the work no one pays you for. You are a hinge on a door that sticks. Sometimes you ease it, sometimes you don't. You keep a bucket by the threshold and an apology in your pocket just in case. You slip to the river for a breath that smells like everything and still has room for your lungs. The water keeps a secret you want to learn and cannot. On the far bank, a fire paints the undersides of clouds orange. Your lane could burn like that in a heartbeat. Everyone knows it. Old Nan sleeps with one eye open, a bucket by the door, and a curse kept hot for any neighbor who doesn't. You fill a pail because she told you to, and because every filled pail steals a bead of sweat from the ghost of a future fire. Back past the barber surgeon's pole, red and white like a sermon, you count your teeth, promise them you will worry about them tomorrow, and keep walking. He is inside humming and sharpening something. You are outside humming and dulling something. The difference is coin, luck, and whether you can outrun rumor. Farther down, a woman everyone calls Aunt haggles over a cloak that remembers other shoulders. She teaches you the math of warmth. 1 cloak equals 2 winters, plus 1 dry night under a wagon, plus the courage to say no to rain once in a while. Before you crawl back into the room that is mostly roof and argument, you stop in the square where the fiddler has found a rhythm that persuades feet. People dance, not beautifully, not cleanly, but like lungs do the first time smoke clears. You stamp your boots, you scrub your hands together. The tune bullies sadness into the corner. Your cousin, the one who never empties the pot, grabs your elbow and spins you, and for a moment you do not hate them. You laugh and startle yourself with the sound. You forgive the day exactly as much as it forgives you. Inside, your cousin has not mended the roof, but they have placed 2 stones under the worst leak, so the drip hits them and makes a sound like a patient drummer instead of a splash that finds your ear. It is almost thoughtful. You lay your day down. The aches, the gossip, the heat you borrowed from the oven, the nod you earned from the midwife as she bulldozed by. You tuck the candle stub into a crack in the wall and promise it an easy death tomorrow. The hen mutters on her perch. The baby sighs like a bellows put to rest. The rat in the rafter resumes his patrol, a sentry who takes pay in crumbs and indifference. Before your eyes close, make a bargain with the present. If you felt yourself in these lanes, if you could smell the soap boiler's lie and the tanner's confession, if the watch's cudgels tapping shutters made your hand close around air, lend this world a little more time. Tap subscribe, ring the bell, and drop a comment telling us what you'd do first if you woke here. Fetch water or chase bread. We explore a fresh corner every day, one new street, one new rumor, one new truth hiding in the muck. Your questions sketch the map. Your stories keep the lanterns lit. Ready to keep walking? Tell me to continue, and we'll dive straight into the next stretch. Through the tanner's yard, past the rag and bone man's knock, and down to the quay where rumor coughs, and we'll carry the thread forward together. You think stepping out of that smoky hut will save you? The road itself is a gauntlet. Ruts run deep as a grave. Carts groan, oxen stumble, and every mile swallows another soul from your shoes. Bridges are luxuries. Most crossings are wet gambles where a rope, a prayer, and someone else's bad footing decide whether you wade, fall, or float. Toll keepers wait at the far bank with palms open. They don't care if your purse is light. The fee still bites, and if you argue, you discover how quickly a cudgel encourages agreement. You keep walking, watching the ditch for nettles and nails, guarding your bread, your little packet of salt, a hope of work in tow. The first town wall seems like salvation until the gatekeeper counts your reasons for entry and your coins with identical suspicion. He quizzes your story. He sniffs your bundle. He eyes the dirt beneath your nails as if treason could hide there. If you're lucky, you hand over a penny and pass through. If not, you wait outside until someone vouches for you or the sun dies, whichever comes first. Inside, the town doesn't open like a promise. It closes around you. Streets pinch into alleys, alleys twist into cul-de-sacs, and every dog that ever learned to hate strangers decides to practice on your ankles. Market day arrives like thunder. Bells, bells, and more bells. The square explodes with stalls and shouting. Cloth merchants snap their bolts to show the weave. Fishwives announce tides. A cooper rolls a barrel straight into your ankle and never breaks rhythm. Bakers thump their loaves and swear the bread is pure, no beans, no chalk, no sawdust, while the town assayer measures weight and pretends not to see. A pig escapes, a boy chases, 4 dogs join, and suddenly the crowd has a center that squeals. Spice sellers turn dust into miracles with the confidence of saints. Pepper for a cough, cinnamon for a marriage, cloves for the breath you didn't know was an offense. Your nose believes, your purse refuses, your stomach appeals. You want work. The guild banners tell you who owns which corner of the economy. The tanners have their own stink, their own saints, their own secrets. They make leather by soaking skins in pits that double as polite invitations to hell. The blacksmiths drum iron with the steady joy of men who never run out of tasks or burns. The weavers speak quietly and count quickly. Thread is money, and a careless knot is a docked wage. You offer your hands to a master and recite the smallest resume in history. I can learn. If he nods, your future becomes a broom, a bench, and a bed at the foot of the stairs. If he frowns, your future becomes the road again. Pickpockets thrive like rats in wheat. They move with the tide, shoulder to shoulder, apologizing as they empty you. If they're caught, the punishment performs itself. Ears, hands, exile. Not always in that order. But catching is rare, shame is heavier than speed, and most people hate the labor of accusation. You wrap your pouch in your belt and keep your elbow over it the way a miser covers a candle from the wind. Meanwhile, hawkers sell miracles. A relic that is certainly a saint's hair, definitely not horse. A charm that guarantees dice will remember your birthday. A salve that promises to cure everything except gullibility. Pause here. If you had only one modern skill to trade for a cramped bed and a daily bowl of pottage, What would you offer, truly? Write one honest line beginning with, "I'd survive by," and then choose a stall where that line might actually keep you breathing. Let's see who's bold enough to pick the tanners. No one says it out loud, but everyone is counting down to the next fire. Chimneys are new money. Most roofs are thatch and prayers. A spilled lamp, a jealous wind, and the town becomes a lit manuscript that no scribe can save. Buckets wait at corners. Neighbors have a plan they will remember badly. The night watch circles with poles and suspicion. Curfew bell rings, and shutters close like eyelids. You find your pallet in a rented loft and sleep with one ear tuned to the crackle that ends fortunes. Dreams are uninspected goods. The church dominates the square not just with stone but with schedule. Bells divide the day like a knife divides bread, unevenly but decisively. Fasts, feasts, saints' days, rogation processions. The calendar smothers you and saves you in the same reach. The best news you'll hear all month is that a relic is visiting. The worst is that it cures what you don't have. You go anyway. You kneel beside your rivals, doff your cap, recite the one prayer you never forget. Please let this pain be someone else's. Candles burn hope into smoke. A priest mentions hell with such intimacy you wonder if he keeps a room there. Illness arrives like a rumor and leaves like a parade. One day a child coughs, and the baker says it's the weather. 3 days later, the baker's wife is boiling linens and humming the only tune she knows that helps. Barber surgeons ply their art with basins, razors, and confidence. They will bleed you to balance your humors and sell you a salve that hides your wound under bravado and lard. If the swelling turns black, the priest comes first. Medicine follows, neither invited. Midwives work miracles with hands that have delivered grief and joy in equal measure, and nobody pays them what either is worth. You wander to the outskirts where the leper house sits apart like a sentence fragment. The bell at its door is small but absolute. Touch is rationed there, measured like flour, granted like indulgence. The residents laugh anyway, because laughter is how people spend courage they can't use on anything else. You drop a coin in a box and feel virtuous for an hour. After that, your stomach interrupts your morality. Food is a ledger that always knows the balance. Bread rules it. The assize says what it must weigh for a farthing and how pure it must be, but hunger edits statutes. In a bad year, mills slow, loaves shrink, and rumors wake up. The miller cheats the poor, the lord hoards the grain, the baker adds chalk. Some of it is true. Most of it tastes true, which is more dangerous. On a feast day, you might see meat, a piece small enough to insult a cat. On a saint's day, you might drink wine and forget the saint. Mostly, you stand in line with a bowl and decide whether the pottage is better with your eyes closed. Law is not blind. Law watches. The manorial court sits under a linden with a clerk whose ink is older than you. Cases are petty and sharp. A fence moved 2 hands into a neighbor's garden. A sow found snout deep in someone's barley. Words that became shoves that became blood. The Lord's steward listens as if he is merciful, then fines as if he isn't. If a crime outruns the village, it meets the town's justice. There the punishments are mnemonic devices. Stocks to remember gossip with your neck. Pillory to illustrate libel with your face. A cart ride to remind thieves they move fastest toward the gate. You pass the gibbet outside the wall and try not to count. Bodies teach the living on quiet days. The crows do their catechism without fail. Children stare because children always look where adults forbid. Your eyes learn the sideways glance of people who want to keep eating. Yet even here, play insists. A piper spits a tune into the alley, and a whole block forgets itself for 7 minutes. Jugglers throw torches until the sheriff coughs meaningfully. A puppet show stages a tiny rebellion and gets the moral backward on purpose. On fair days, the square becomes a carnival. Wrestlers, miracle plays, wrestling called miracle plays, charms, riddles, saints made of painted wood that weep on schedule. You spend the coin you swore to save because joy is an interest payment you can't afford to miss. Listen. Before you romanticize any of this, try breathing after 3 hours inside a tannery. Try sleeping while the lice negotiate a separate piece across your scalp. Try wearing the same wool in July that you wore in January and calling it gratitude. If you've made it this far through the day, you've earned the right to imagine leaving. But leaving is its own kind of loyalty. The road will take your coin, your boot leather, and your illusions. It might give you a song you can sell for supper. Choose carefully. Songs don't keep rain off. Travelers' tales bend the map. In the alehouse, a mason swears he saw a city where the wells spit wine and the streets run straight. A sailor claims the Pope has a garden where lions purr like baker's cats. Someone from Flanders describes cloth so fine you can pull a bolt of it through the eye of a saint's needle. No one believes anything, and everyone wants details. You tell them what you saw on the road: fog like a god, a stag with a crown of burrs, a tree with a face where a man once hanged. That last story buys you a drink and a silence. Apprenticeship grinds years into a single edge. Dawn: sweep the floor, tend the fire, say the prayer your master prefers. Noon: fetch, file, fetch again. Dusk: put away every tool like it has your name on it, because someday it might. Your wage is food, your pay is training, your hope is a future that looks exactly like your master's present. If you break a rule, he breaks the day over your back. If you break a tool, he counts it in your sleep. You cling to the one promise that keeps apprentices honest. Someday, you will own a bench that no one can order you away from. Women keep this world upright while men pretend to hold it. Brewsters run alehouses and reputations. Midwives hold 100 lives in calloused hands. Spinners turn winter into thread. Vendors balance 2 baskets and a family on the same shoulder. Widows run shops because death doesn't understand leases. Wives work the market, the house, the garden, and the accounts, invisible to the ledger until a mistake needs a culprit. If a woman laughs too loud, she's judged. If she bargains too hard, she's judged. If she wins, she's judged harder. None of this is news. All of it is policy. Guild halls glow with candles and rules. To be free of a master and call yourself master in turn, you present a masterpiece. It must work, astonish, and obey. The examiners praise with one hand and point out flaws with the other. They accept coin to soften the blow, but not enough coin to embarrass the saint over the door. When you pass, you are suddenly allowed the fiction that you did it alone. You hang your sign, marry if you haven't, and count how many apprentices you can afford before you become the villain you swore you wouldn't. The town's sound is a loom: warp, hammer, wheel, bell, knife on whetstone. Weft, wager, lullaby, curse, prayer. Dogs stitch the day together from corner to corner. Geese patrol the lanes like rude officials and scream at everyone. Children mock the clerk's Latin in a chorus that would get them whipped if he could catch them. A single cart loses a single nail, and 4 men discuss it like jurists for 20 minutes. Night falls not like a curtain, but like the lid on a pot, heavy, necessary, and carrying the taste of everything it covers. Let's test you. You've got 3 coins, a tired back, and a choice. Buy a pair of turn shoes from the cordwainer and promise your feet a future, or buy a candle and promise your eyes an extra hour. Either purchase is an investment. Either could fail. Tell me which you choose and why. The most convincing answer earns a place in the next story, right where the road forks. Now the sheriff wants to see you. Not for a crime yet, but for an oath. All towns live on oaths. You swear to keep the peace, to raise the hue and cry when needed, to appear when summoned, to help drag a troublemaker before the alderman. In exchange, the town promises that when you are the troublemaker, your neighbors will do the same without enthusiasm. Watch lists circulate. Names stick. Scars do public relations your mouth can't undo. You learn to nod in the right places and keep your jokes short. Cloth is the king that never sits still. Fullers stomp it soft with urine and water until the reek moves into your bones. Dyers draw colors from plants as if the earth were a well-behaved dragon. Madder for red, woad for blue, weld for yellow. A city that knows its dyes holds its head higher. A weaver who knows his patterns eats better. But every success taxes itself. Sumptuary laws descend like sermons, telling you who can wear what. Your wife admires a sleeve too fine for your station, and you both memorize the penalties like a prayer you hope not to say. Music finds the cracks. A psaltery brightens a dark hour. A drum saves a wedding from formality. A blind fiddler plays for his bowl and slips curses into the corners of his melodies. Your steps skirt them without you even noticing. In a year of meager harvest, songs become more biting. The authorities hate them. They hang the worst offenders and ban the rest, but a melody can slip through all the laws and arrive humming at your door. Cross the river at dawn and you might meet the drovers, men with 100 hooves to manage and 1 brain between them. They move cattle like a weather front. You get out of the way or become a proverb. Carters swear at wheels with the intimacy of saints naming angels. A merchant flashes a tally stick in an attitude. The notch means he owes or is owed, and the attitude means he expects to collect either way. You, meanwhile, carry 1 loaf wrapped in cloth and say you're not hungry. You think this is dignity. It's camouflage. Temptations are organized. The stews have names everyone uses loudly or quietly depending on who's listening. The bawds have rules. No drunks who can't count, no clerks who can't pay, no knives. They break all three when the moon says so. The city tolerates it, taxes it, condemns it, and uses it as a relief valve. Morality is a pendulum that never stops moving, but always passes the same point. You learn to time your walks. A procession interrupts a quarrel the way rain interrupts a fire. Out come the banners, the relic, the hymn, every child knows before they know their letters. The guilds walk in order, oldest first, richest louder. The mayor looks like a candlestick with legs. Behind them rolls a cart with a pageant, the fall, the flood, the harrowing of hell, compacted into a believable afternoon by carpenters and faith. The devil steals the show as always. He winks at a girl in the crowd, who laughs, and three old women cross themselves in unison. War is a rumor until the heralds appear. Then the rumor puts on boots. The town owes men and money to a lord you've never met. Men vanish in small groups and return in smaller ones. Prices climb like ladders, coin turns shy. Letters arrive for people who cannot read them. The friar explains the contents to their widows with a voice too soft to be kind. You look at the wall and ask yourself whether it would hold. You look at your child and ask a worse question you don't say out loud. Winter is not a season here. Winter is an accountant. It totals your choices. It audits your pride. If you saved well, you make it to Candlemas with your dignity intact. If you didn't, you sell a cloak, a cup, a promise, and then you start visiting neighbors with a face carefully painted to look like casual conversation. Charity keeps the poor alive and the rich forgiven. Both sides keep score. Spring arrives anyway. Crocuses stab the thaw, and the town pretends this was inevitable. Stand in the cemetery and read what's left of names on what's left of stones. Most are short. The long ones belong to men who died away and were brought back in stories before they were brought back in bone. The churchyard is crowded. The bones know each other. On windy nights you can believe the dead are having a conversation the living aren't invited to. It isn't frightening. It's rude. Take a breath, carefully. If any moment in this mess made you think, I could manage that, mark it. Those are your illusions speaking. Keep them. We all need a few. But write one sentence that begins, I'd fail at, and be precise. The comment that makes me wince the most gets a quiet nod in the next chapter's opening line. You came to the town for safety, and learned safety is a sliding scale. You came for work, and learned work is a story you tell your body so it doesn't mutiny. You came for a future, and learned the future here is an argument between the seasons and the saints. And yet, despite fleas with ambition, bread with opinions, and neighbors with memories like bailiffs, something in you wants to stay. Maybe it's the bell that means time has a shape. Maybe it's the way sunlight slides down a wall of wattle and daub like a blessing nobody had to authorize. Maybe it's just that the town knows your face now, and indifference is the first form of love. Before you go, choose. Do you keep your apprentice oath when a better offer winks, or break it and run? Do you testify honestly when the alewife you like stands accused of shaving measures, or keep your mouth loyal and your soul adjustable? Do you give your last onion to the woman at the leper gate, or keep it for the stew that will keep you steady long enough to help again tomorrow? There isn't a right answer. There's a ledger, and the entries don't balance until you're not around to see them. This is the Middle Ages, not the mural, and you're in it now. A moving piece, a hungry witness, a speck in a choir that still finds harmony more days than not. You won't wear shining mail or vault a destrier over a moat. You'll thread a needle at dusk and feel like a champion. You'll find a crack in the town's hard face and plant a geranium there, because color is a small defiance that costs less than bread. You'll wash your hands in water that looks like a dare and call it preparation. And when the bell rings for vespers or warning or wonder, you'll be among the bodies that move together as if by consent. That's the miracle. Not the relic, not the rite, but the choreography of survival. And if you want to keep walking with me through this world, tap the bell on your way out, not to subscribe, but to signal you want the High Doors tour. I'm counting hands, not hearts, and I'll bring the tally stick. Coins lie. Silver content slides with politics and famine. Some are fat with honesty, others jingle like promises. You learn to bite a penny and watch for the lines where a sharper man clipped shavings to sell to a goldsmith. Tallies and credit do the real work. A notch on your stick, a notch on his, two halves that marry when the bill comes due. Barter endures underneath it all. Eggs for needles, labor for lodging, a song for a seat near the fire. The man who refuses barter swears he loves coin. He really loves witnesses. Sanitation has a hierarchy. The street is the bottom, and the river is the place where the bottom goes to pretend it isn't. Gutters carry everything to the water, and the water carries everything to someone else. Gong farmers come at night. I know you don't like that word, but there is no polite hour for this work, to drag away what everyone makes and no one wants. They earn good coin, and nobody invites them to dinner. Mills sit downstream from dreams and upstream from reality. If you already drank weak ale for safety, now you drink it for grief. If you crave quiet, you'll try a monastery. The walls breathe differently there. The air tastes of wax, old vellum, and bread that learned patience. The hours rule, not the market. A bell calls you to everything and nobody asks your preference. In the scriptorium, a monk sharpens a quill into a spear and aims it at time. Letters march across calfskin like pilgrim feet across a valley. Margins bloom with rabbits riding snails and bishops lecturing foxes. Someone drops a blot and turns it into a bird because grace is cheaper than vellum. You leave with a word in your mouth that feels expensive. Silence. Hospitality is a duty, not a mood. Strangers get 3 days and a sermon. After that, they become less exotic and more economic. You learn the art of guesting, how to compliment a stew without implying there was too much salt, how to thank a host without suggesting the bench was harder than pride, how to listen to a story you've already heard twice this month as if it were just minted from a royal mouth. In return, you get shelter, gossip, and a place by the hearth where your damp shoes steam like fresh bread. The great fairs rewire the year. Champagne, Saint-Denis, Bruges, they're more than markets, they're engines. Caravans wrap Europe together like string around a parcel. You can buy pepper that convinced a fleet to risk its soul, or silk that remembers a different alphabet. Contracts are written, marriages arranged, reputations made, bankruptcies rehearsed. The town you left as a customer you return to as cargo. Risk multiplies, and so does the world. You meet a woman who knows 3 ways to dye blue, and 2 ways to get paid on time. You leave with a headache and a new definition of expensive. Names multiply too. In a village, you're Thomas because there's only one. In a town, you're Thomas Miller, or Thomas at Bridge, or Thomas who survived the fever because there are 5 others who didn't. Surnames settle like silt. Profession, place, parent, joke that stuck. Identity is practical. It follows your tools and your taxes. You carry a letter of safe conduct if you can get one, and if you can't, you carry a friend's name on your tongue and hope it opens a gate before it breaks your teeth. Medicine isn't only knives and hope. The herb wives know hedgerow Latin that saves lives, plantain for bites, yarrow for bleeding, willow for aches that have become a personality. They measure in handfuls, not drams, and time by prayers, not sand. The physicians deride them, then take notes. Between them lies a pharmacy of faith, saint's oil, blessed salt, a splinter said to be from a true cross that keeps finding more wood. If you heal, everyone thanks God. If you don't, everyone blames someone who can't sue. Entertainment gets formal. Guilds sponsor mystery cycles, hour-long miracles stitched into all-day spectacles. Noah's wife refuses the ark with comic fury in every town from here to York. Herod struts and forgets his cue. The devil falls off the stage because the trapdoor stuck. You watch the harrowing of hell and feel a private victory for reasons that embarrass you later. Between scenes, sellers hawk pies and sermons with equal sincerity. You go home sunburned, hoarse, and strangely lighter, as if the play drained envy and left awe. Hunters in the Lord's forest wear laws like cloaks. Deer belong to someone who never touches dirt. Rabbits are negotiable. A snare brings meat and risk in equal measures. Poaching is not just theft, it's treason with gravy. You learn the difference between hunger and courage and discover the Venn diagram overlaps more than you'd like. A single rabbit can taste like victory or a mistake. The sauce depends on who's watching. Meanwhile, falconers walk past like minor gods. Birds on wrists, leashes like verses, they do not nod. Crafts fail beautifully. A pot cracks and becomes a measure for grain. A shoe splits and becomes a lesson for an apprentice who thought wax could fix leather. An old cart loses a wheel and becomes a chicken roost that inspires an argument about dignity in 5 households. Nothing dies until it has failed at 3 different careers. Even people get repurposed. Warriors become watchmen, watchmen become doormen, and more than one doorman becomes a storyteller, because the door never asked for his opinion. And someone might, architecture teaches manners. Doorways are short, so you bow to your host whether you mean to or not. Floors creak in codes, a heavy footman's thud, a child's skitter, a thief's apology. Windows are eyes with cataracts. Glass is rare and wavy where it exists. Most homes blink with oiled linen or horn. Sunlight decides your schedule and your mood and can't be bribed. You lie in bed and catalog drafts like constellations. If you can afford a feather mattress, you sentence yourself to sneezing. If you can't, you sentence yourself to splinters. If you wander long enough from parish to parish, the law follows you. Refuge calls you to the open door of a church, but refuge has its rules, and rules have their loopholes. You can ask the king for peace for a set number of days, then choose exile in a ceremony that should be absurd, but isn't. Bare feet, confession, a path whose name is given to you along the way. For some, this path leads to ships, for others, to the door of a monastery. For many, it loops back and brings them back to the same town, with a different haircut. Language is in perpetual motion. 3 languages share the market, and none apologizes. Latin preserves archives and rituals. The vernacular sustains society. French leans on law and fashion like a patron. We learn enough from each to avoid humiliation, which is the true universal language. Swear words translate perfectly. Blessings are attempted, and their accent is delightful. Ultimately, time is a builder. It shapes habits without us even noticing. It replaces people without our consent. It polishes our terror until it fits in our pocket. One morning, we look up and realize that the city is no longer a labyrinth, but a map, and that our feet know more than our fear. This is what most closely resembles a triumph. Familiarity disguised as victory, routine simulating peace, our name known at 3 doors and not at the gallows. You shoulder through the alley where the sun never quite bothers to visit, and the air hits you with a wall of cabbage steam, pig breath, and damp wool. A bucket slops from a half-open window. You twist aside just in time, because here gravity carries more than rain. Forget painted fairs and clean banners. This is the city's stomach, and it digests people slowly. If you want to keep your shoes, watch your step. If you want to keep your day, watch your mouth. We're going deeper, not as tourists, but as neighbors who know which doors stick and which broom handles reach the latch from the bed. The boards above your head complain like old men as a cart scrapes through, its wheels grinding the alley walls into flour. A goose nips your shin, a child laughs with missing teeth and an untroubled conscience. Everything is closer here. Walls, elbows, debt. Smells overlap like gossip, and both travel faster than coin. You know the rhythm by now. Water sellers calling like gulls, a tinker's hammer tapping little suns out of tin, a fishwife declaring prices that change with your shoes. A monk slips by with a basket of crusts and a complicated opinion about sin and soup. You nod the way people nod when they agree with hunger more than theology. You pick your way past a doorway where 3 families pretend the world gave them separate rooms. It didn't. Bedding piles during the day, bodies pile at night, and privacy is a rumor that grew tired of trying. In the corner, a man patches a boot with waxed linen, teeth serving as a third hand. On the step, a woman shakes a blanket hard enough to declare war on fleas. Her neighbor applauds. Domestic victories are public sport. Look up, and the street narrows even more. Second stories bulge over first stories, as if houses are leaning together to exchange secrets. Smoke stitches everything together. Cooking fires, pits where bones crackle, a brazier keeping a baby from shivering into a cough that never ends. A bell somewhere promises midday prayers that most here will make with their hands instead of their feet. In this slum, devotion competes with survival, and survival usually wins on points. Hunger has a schedule, and the baked goods stall knows it. You join the line where the baker's boy sells loaves that look bigger than yesterday's, but weigh less. He dusts them heavy and winks. Flour is cheaper than wheat, and illusion pays well. You squeeze the crust and pretend not to notice. Everyone pretends. Bread is a negotiation with hunger, and hunger is a politician. Never satisfied, always back tomorrow. You count your coins. A few coppers, one clipped so thin it could slice a finger. Yesterday's labor paid in ale and promises. Today's will pay in something you can chew. Maybe. A mason waves you over to haul rubble from a half-fallen wall. You bargain without pride. Pride is a tax you can't afford. He offers you pottage for lunch, a scoop of boiled everything flavored with hope. The right answer is yes. You say it like a prayer and mean it like a plan. Work here is loud and precise. The tanner's yard thunders with paddles and reeks of secrets no saint could keep. Hides soak in pits the color of dying bulbs, stirred by men who can't escape the smell even in their sleep. The dyers next door stain cloth and hands alike. woad blues, madder reds, welled yellows that catch the eye and won't let go. Their apprentices carry buckets like small planets, or else wear them like hats until the master roars and laughter turns to work again. Every trade marks a body. The blacksmith's shoulders swear in iron. The fuller's knees know the weight of wet cloth like a confession. The fishmonger's develop a permanent shrug that says, "It was fresher this morning." The candlemaker's fingers glow with wax. You learn people by their hands here, not their words. Words change, calluses don't. The water seller's cry climbs the alley, and you think about wells. The rich ones covered, guarded, taxed. The poor ones open to the sky, open to the bucket that last scraped the bottom after a storm. The river doesn't help. It carries stories from upstream, wastes, blessings, ashes, mercy, indifference. You buy a jug anyway because thirst loudly refuses theory. The cup tastes like yesterday's cup, and that is sometimes better than a surprise. Waste has its own economy. When the gong farmer comes at dusk to empty cesspits, he wears dignity like armor and coins sewn into his sleeve. People hold their noses and then their tongues. The job smells like hell, but the pay smells like a meal and a blanket. He nods to you with the calm of a man who knows the city can't function without the task no one praises. If you need an example of where real power hides, watch who takes away what everyone leaves behind. You turn into the market square that the fine folk avoid except when they're bored. Stalls hunch under patched cloth. A barber surgeon sharpens a razor with the same tenderness you'd use on a baby. He will pull teeth, bleed elbows, and declare you fit enough to carry on. A weaver sings to keep her shuttle honest. A girl with a basket sells onion greens with the sales pitch of a poet. You buy because the green feels like news. Here justice is as public as hunger. A thief stands in the stocks with cabbage leaves in his hair, a sign around his neck that blames both him and his mother. Children throw orange peels and advice. An old woman sells pies with the confidence of royalty. You ask what's inside. Meat, she says. You ask which meat. Today's, she says, and you pay because hunger doesn't need surnames. The city watch ambles through, faces made of boredom and bribes. One claps a boy on the shoulder hard enough to remind him not to be clever. Another buys a cup of ale and takes his time tasting it. They are here to keep order, but order costs money, and money makes its own orders. Justice will be loud when it arrives, and late when it matters. You duck beneath a banner strung between windows, someone's idea of a festival that survived long enough to dry. Musicians scratch at strings. A man on stilts makes faces. You laugh because the joke tried. Laughter in the slum is earned by effort, not brilliance. The clown trips, recovers, tips an invisible hat. Children echo him with perfect timing and no stilts at all. You step into a courtyard shared by the unlucky. Laundry ropes zigzag in the air like battle plans. A bucket brigade passes water to a woman whose stove surprised her by becoming a fire. Everyone moves without being told, one to fetch more water, one to carry out a crying toddler, one to cover the doorway with a wet blanket. The flames sulk and then surrender. Afterward, the woman's hands shake. Someone presses an apple into them as if fruit could catch tears. For a moment, near the butcher's table, a dog argues with a raven over a scrap that used to be a pig. The butcher whistles, the dog yields, the raven pretends to have intended to leave. You watch him toss offal into a tub for sausage, and you don't ask what else joined the party. If food isn't honest, at least it is thorough. You buy a strip of crackling and let it slice your gums into gratitude. A fur trader from the north displays pelts that whisper of colder streets. He tells a story about a river that freezes so hard you can walk to a city across the water and still be late. You trade him a scrap of gossip for a look at something soft. People in the slum barter facts when coin is shy. Who got married, who got buried, who got luck and where it now lives. Facts here are currency and warmth. Behind a shuttered door, a woman known for remedies measures a pinch of powder with sacramental care. She knows more about fevers than the parish priest, and less about heaven. Mothers bring her babies with coughs. Men bring their wrists with bites. Everyone brings their fears, knotted up in cloth. She asks good questions and makes better tea. When she doesn't know, she says so, which is why people trust her more than the men who never say the words. Afternoon leans toward evening, and a fresh procession of sellers takes the stage. Eel men shout in a rhythm that belongs to the river. Hot pie girls balance trays like crowns and move fast enough to outrun flies. A minstrel plucks a melody that makes the alley feel almost like a courtyard of manners. He sings of a knight who loved a miller's daughter and starved politely rather than steal. The slum snorts and tosses him coins for bravery and fiction. You pass the tallow chandler's shop, where candles wait like small affordable miracles. Light is rationed here, measured in inches and decisions. Read a letter or mend a sleeve. Feed the shrine or the eyes. You buy a stub that promises an hour if the drafts mind their manners. It will never last an hour. Things in this neighborhood learn to end early. A shout rises from the lane. Men spill from the alehouse arguing about nothing important in words that sound like war. You stand aside and consider whether to intervene. The rule is simple. If the knives aren't out, time will fix it. If the knives come out, time will bury it. Today, time earns its keep. One man laughs, the other pretends he meant the laugh all along, and someone buys a round with coin that used to be for rent. You stop at the miller's door, where a chalk line keeps a tally of favors owed. He takes your grain without asking where you got it, and returns flour without promising how much of it is yours. Mills nibble like mice. It's understood and cursed in equal measure. He smiles, a sunny expression with clouds behind it. You leave before the clouds feel like rain. Supper smells like negotiation. Pottage bubbles with whatever onions survived the afternoon, and a heroic carrot that thinks it's a roast. A heel of bread breaks into coins that feed a shared bowl. Meat is a visitor, not a tenant. Spice arrives only if ships arrived earlier with luck aboard. You add a splash of ale to the pot and call it cunning. The stew calls you hungry and wins. When the old woman downstairs coughs, the whole building hears the sentence. Illness here is not private. The cough coughs to the neighbors. The neighbors fetch the remedy woman. Someone finds the priest if the cough refuses to be negotiated with. Children are hustled to a friend's step. Doors open that never do. Men who argue about everything stop arguing about anything. The slum knows how to grieve without an invitation. You make a delivery for the mason down by the river, passing the tanners again, where bark and urine and time transform hide into leather and men into rumor. Their foreman nods, eyes narrowed against a permanent stink. Beyond them, the dyers empty vats into a ditch that pretends to be a stream. The colors run like escaped prisoners. Ducks vote with their feet. On the bridge, a juggler balances iron spikes for a group that pretends to be unimpressed. He tosses one higher than sense, catches it with a flourish, bows so low he almost cleans the planks with his hair. You notice how he scans the crowd as much as the sky. A juggler drops fewer coins when he drops no eyes. He sees you notice. He winks. Work respects work. A clerk hurries past in a robe that was clean this morning. He carries a roll of laws under his arm like a cudgel made of parchment. He is the city's voice when the city desires manners. He posts a notice on a door, fines for throwing slops in daylight, fines for pigs wandering free, fines for fishing with your hands because the Lord says fish require respect. The slum adds graffiti in ink that dries quickly and laughs slowly. Your rote takes you by the bakehouse again. A boy burns his thumb and curses the saint in charge of small pains. The master swats him and blesses the saint twice to balance the books. A woman with a baby on her hip asks for a loaf on credit. The master sighs and acts like the request is new. She leaves with the bread and a debt that won't sleep. He writes her name in chalk, then smudges it with his sleeve. Maybe by accident, maybe not. Sundown squeezes the light into orange coins on the cobbles. The city will close its gates soon. The slum never does. You head toward your room through lanes that already feel different. Day work has the shape of lines. Night work has the shape of corners. Musicians tune in doorways. Dice clack like bones, thinking out loud. A vendor roasts chestnuts and sells warmth by the handful. A storyteller perches on a barrel and promises the truth, which means he's lying beautifully. He tells of a ghost that haunts the magistrate's dreams, demanding tax relief, and the crowd claps at the idea even if they don't believe the ghost. He asks for a copper. People throw him too, not because the story was perfect, but because it kept the cold from winning for a few minutes. He bows and warns that the ghost will return. Taxes always do. You join a line outside the public bath, which is more soup than water and more rumor than steam. The fee is a joke. The heat is real. The company is loud. Men with the day still stuck to their skins scrub with rushes and talk about work they didn't get and work they didn't want. A boy has stolen a piece of soap and guards it like treasure. An old soldier traces scars the way some people trace prayers. Back in the alley, a fiddler tries out a melancholy tune that immediately gets optimistic when a girl with quick feet starts to dance. Her shoes are thin. Her laugh is not. People tap along, hard enough to tell the cobbles they matter. Someone passes a cup. It returns less full and more generous. You stay because movement makes sense, even when money doesn't. A constable with a lantern declares curfew with a voice that asks for early retirement. Curfew is for people with doors that fit. The slum improvises. Lads vanish into shadows that know their names. Women take side streets that were built by habit. The night watch clacks their staves to remind you that sound counts as law when law is tired. You keep moving, because stillness is an invitation you can't afford to send. You make it back to the room you share with a friend who snores like a saw. He's out. The single shutter groans. The draft drafts you. A candle fights bravely and dies correctly. You listen to the building settle, which is a generous word for wood deciding how much it can take without complaining. Rats negotiate territorial treaties under the floor. You pound once with your heel to remind them sovereignty is complicated. Across the lane, a woman hums a lullaby about saints who kept their promises. Downstairs, someone loses a coin and swears like the coin might be hiding under shame. From far off, a bell marks a pocket of order. You think about the day and discover it weighs more when you hold it than when you live it. You set it down with care, like a fragile bowl that belongs to someone who will ask about it in the morning. The city breathes, not soft, not slow, just steady, like a beast that learned long ago how to eat everything and still want more. You are part of that breath, whether you like it or not. Every choice here is small and loud. Spend the last copper on bread or rent. Fix the boot or the roof. Tell the truth or tell the version that gets you what you need. The slum doesn't judge, it remembers. And the memory of places is heavy. There's a knock. A messenger for the bailiff, face clean enough to make enemies. He hands you a paper with a seal that pretends paper can't be ignored. A levy, he says. A tax for the Lord's wall that keeps the wrong winds out of the right gardens. You point at your thin purse and ask which wind will fill it. He shrugs, as if shrugging were a profession. You sign with a mark, because writing belongs to richer hands. Tomorrow, a collector will visit with a smile that doesn't move his eyes. You swallow the unfairness like bread. It doesn't go down, but it keeps you standing. Tomorrow you'll find extra work unloading a barge or carrying stones or guarding nothing for no reason in exchange for silver that belongs to your landlord the moment it touches your palm. And you'll hand it over because eviction in winter is a chapter you don't want to read again. In the lane a fight flares, the real kind. Knives ask greedy questions. Someone screams the hue and cry and doors open. The neighborhood pours out like a bucket. No one here is brave in the way ballads describe. You are practiced. You know how to surround a problem with bodies and noise until it forgets why it started. The watch arrives late and loud. The knives go away and then so does everyone else, in no particular order. A fire starts 3 doors down. Not a joke this time. A spilled oil lamp kisses a rush mat and asks for more. You run before your name remembers not to. The corridor fills with black thinking. You cough a curse that isn't a prayer but hopes to be. By now the slum knows the dance. Ladder, buckets, blankets, doors pried open, the kind of shouting that saves. You and a baker crash through a shutter and pass a toddler from one set of hands to another until the child arrives at air. The mother finds breath and loses it again and finds it again. Later someone will ask who carried the ladder. 5 people will answer, I did. If your heart is hammering, good. That's the moment I need you, a builder inside this story, to do something that takes one thumb and helps us keep making worlds together. Hit subscribe and tap the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. We craft a new adventure here every day. Then drop a comment with the one job you'd take in this neighborhood and why. Night soil? Water cellar? Pie hawker? Pick your trade and tell me how you'd survive the week. The smartest, funniest answers get shouted out, and the ones that make me say oof become scenes we'll stage together next. Dawn will come whether you ask or not. When it does, the alley will already be awake. Bread carts will rattle urns, apprentices will chase punctuality with mixed success, the priest will practice mercy at volume. You'll roll your shoulders and test your knees and count your coins and plan your lies. You'll visit the miller and pretend not to see how his sack grew during the night. You'll thank the remedy woman and promise to pay. You'll avoid the notice on the church door because news is bad when it's nailed to wood. You'll kindly step over a sleeping dog and narrowly avoid the puddle that has ambitions of being a lake. Before sleep, there's a defiant joy the slum insists on. A wedding stumbles home under a sky brave enough to be clear. A fiddle mocks sorrow until sorrow laughs back. Two neighbors, enemies for a season, share a bench outside the bakehouse and remember they once liked each other. A boy discovers a caltrop in a ditch and invents a universe where he is a knight and the ditch a border worth dying for. His mother lets him have 5 minutes of kingdom. Then she carries him inside. You close your eyes and you are not alone. You can hear the building counting itself. Beams, nails, hopes, repairs postponed. You can hear the river telling the moon what it stole today. You can hear the far-off gates groan for the last time. And you can hear this lane, your lane now, mutter the promise it mutters every night. We'll make something tomorrow from whatever scraps survive the dark. Morning again, and the chickens have opinions. The baker's boy yawns his way through dough like a ship through fog. The remedy woman checks a fever and declares the child winning. The tanner swears he'll move upriver and never does. The dyer points to stained hands and says he is blessed by color. The barber surgeon sharpens steel with the attention of a saint late for church. The water seller's cry is the exact same pitch as a baby's, possibly on purpose. You shoulder a crate for the mason and watch a procession pass. Guild banners, saints' bones in a glass box, children who forgot to be solemn. The slum is at the edge of everything, but never outside it. When the Lord wants a crowd, he gets one from here. When the city wants a miracle, it borrows hands from here. When a rumor wants legs, it steals them from here and runs like it invented speed. A merchant from far away opens a chest that smells like distance, pepper, cloves, cinnamon. A miracle is how heat stops being boredom. He names a price, you calculate a year's rent, and then somebody buys a pinch anyway because weddings live on rude arithmetic. He wraps the spice like a newborn. The buyer cradles it like one. For a moment, luxury and tenderness share a step. Taxes show up again, as they always do. This time the collector brings a clerk, a soldier, and regret. He wants a pig that hasn't been born, a barrel that hasn't been filled, a debt that hasn't been agreed on. The slum raises its eyebrows. He recites the Lord's rights. Someone recites the neighborhood's memory of last winter. The soldier grows bored. The clerk cracks a smile at the wrong line in the wrong face. The collection goes poorly, which means it goes on. When the extra is taken from the almost enough, quarrels bloom. Two women argue over the right to a corner where their mothers sold apples. A boy throws a stone at a sign that never paid him. A man who sings for weddings sings to himself and for once doesn't get paid. The slum sulks in daylight, which is ugly, and then, correctly, it forgives faster than a lord ever would, because tomorrow refuses grudges. It has too much to carry. Midday heat turns the lane into a slow stew. Flies divide themselves fairly among everyone. A pig plots an escape from a rope and wins until somebody with a better rope unwinds it. You deliver stone to a site where a new wall rises like certainty. The master mason calls your work good, then he calls someone else's the same. Praise is a tool here, useful, then spent. You catch the scent of a fish stall that proves how close the sea really is when coin moves faster. Eels twitch in the tub, a reminder that life insists. The monger slips you a thin one for free because you once helped his cousin during a bad hour. The slum's bank is favors. Withdrawals require trust. Deposits require time. Interest is measured in funerals attended and doors opened. You slip into a church not because you are good, but because the cool stones offer a kind of truce. Candles tint the air with beeswax confessions. A widow lights one and stares hard enough to rewrite a saint's biography. The priest looks at you and decides you belong here today, which is generous. You close your eyes and thank any listening ear for the roof that didn't fall, the soup that didn't burn, the child who didn't cough, the friend who returned the tool he borrowed on the same day he took it. The amen has sawdust on it and means more that way. Outside, a player troupe unrolls a stage from a wagon like a magician unrolling a sky. They perform a farce about a lazy lord and an industrious pig. The pig wins. The crowd roars with the specific joy of watching the truth wear a mask. Children memorize lines they will repeat to get out of chores. Mothers pretend not to notice and fail. A shout. Someone has spotted a man with a purse that forgot how to be attached. Chase spills through the alley, across laundry, over baskets, under a donkey. You are not a hero, but you are tired of losing. You stick out a foot at exactly the right time. The thief goes down in a roll that would impress any fighter. He skids to a stop against a wall that always catches people. He looks up and meets a circle of eyes that have seen everything and forgiven much, but not this. The purse returns to its owner. The thief returns to learning. There is always a funeral. There is always a wedding. Today the funeral passes first. 4 men carrying a box that held more jokes last week than today. Women keen softly. Men stare at the ground as if they were reading instructions. The priest says words that close a door politely. A child watches and learns the first lines of a play he will perform many times. Then the wedding passes. Shoes scuffed from dancing, faces raw from laughter, a bride who looks at the world like it blinked, and she didn't. Life moving both directions on the same street, arguing amiably about right of way. Near sunset, you help raise a timber that might be a roof if nothing interrupts. Up goes wood, up goes hope. Someone curses the rope, someone else blesses the knot. The beam decides to be generous. When it seats, the alley applauds because buildings don't get born alone. The mason nods as if he expected competence all along. Maybe he did. Maybe that's his kind of prayer. You're tired enough to tell the truth without decorating it. The slum is unfair, unsafe, unwashed, and full of people who refuse to be measured only by what they lack. You've learned where to place your feet and where to place your trust. You've learned which jokes to make and which to keep for when jokes are the only medicine left. You've learned that survival here is an art, taught by neighbors, graded by weather, revised by hunger. One last corner for today, because the map of this neighborhood is never finished, and every turn holds a grammar test in survival. The guild hall at the edge of the market looks too proud for these streets, yet it leans on them more than it admits. Inside, masters debate standards, prices, apprentices, and rules that make sense if you own a bench and a lock. Outside, the bench and the lock are wishes. A brewer complains the new well water tastes of coins. A co-opper mutters about warped staves. A cobbler swears the Lord's men wear out souls twice as fast as anyone else. Providence and robbery in one breath. You linger in the doorway, learning who whispers and who rearranges air with his voice. Across the lane, debt writes its own scripture. A moneylender sits behind a shutter with a hole just wide enough for a coin and a desperate sentence. People hate him the way they hate doctors, loudly, then gratefully. He isn't a villain or a saint, he's a gear that turns hope into rent. By the river, rumor sharpens knives. Bad harvest in the hinterlands, prices jump. A limping foreign ship, suddenly everyone knows whose accent to blame. You watch the crowd choose a scapegoat, because choosing a plan is harder, then watch the baker lower his voice and slip a second heel into an old woman's bag because his mother taught him the shape of mercy. Winter will test that shape. Floods come in spring and remember addresses. Sometimes the fair opens and the world enters on stilts. Jugglers, sellers of miracles, a goose that bows better than some lords. Sometimes the midwife's hands meet new lives in rooms too small for beginnings. Every day the slum keeps score with a pencil that never quite dulls. If you're counting, add this. The baker's boy burned himself 1 time fewer. The remedy woman sent 3 fevers home. The mason's beam still holds. The river stole 2 hats. The juggler taught a child to catch. Nothing here is simple, but the total is not only sorrow. Add the laughter when chestnuts pop right, the way neighbors move a table into the lane and call it a feast, the kindness that glows under sarcasm. This too is part of the arithmetic. Rip off the gilded frame and history stops posing. Suddenly it breathes, sweats, and stares you down. You're not a spectator anymore. You're in the room, in the dust, in the rumor. Keep your feet under you. We're walking the long corridor where power, pain, and myth share a single echoing spine. Start with the smell that refuses to leave. Straw soured by rain, pottage that never finishes, the hammer of a church bell that does not ask but orders. Beds are sacks of hay that bite back. Fleas make rent-free kingdoms in your seams. Streets double as sewers and bulletins. You don't sip, you gulp weak ale because water is treachery with a clear face. Morning is a chore list written by weather. There's a bucket behind the door if you're poor, a public bench with holes if your town invested in humiliation, and a long drop called the garderobe if you're lucky enough to live over stone. From upper windows, people sing a warning, Gardaloo, just before emptiness becomes somebody else's misfortune. Rushes on the floor trap the story of last week's dinner and yesterday's accidents. When it rains, the lanes turn to brown arguments that stain everything the same color. Bathing happens when it can and where it can, in tubs that serve the whole household or in rivers that double as laundries. You keep a knife at your belt, not for war but for lunch. You share a spoon or drink from a communal bowl. You eat pottage that changes personality with whatever the market pitied you enough to sell. At night, the shutters become laws. In the morning, the bell becomes a calendar. This is not misery for spectacle. It is the arithmetic of survival, and it writes itself into your posture, your patience, your prayers. Now pivot, stone steps, velvet shadows, and a throne that looks permanent until the room starts whispering. A teenage girl walks into a capital she wasn't born to and understands sooner than anyone else that belonging can be manufactured like artillery. Rename yourself. Rehearse your prayers in a new tongue. Memorize faces. Hide your thoughts where no valet can iron them out. In the mirror, you practice the one expression that survives every political climate. Attentiveness warmed just enough to be mistaken for affection. She learns quickly, because the palace punishes slowly and forever when you don't. She learns quickly that palaces have weather, and it changes with the smallest breeze. A letter mislaid, a rumor misheard, a toast held too long. The air plays at soldiers. The empress plays at eternity. She chooses the more realistic game. When the bell finally tolls for the wrong ruler, she rides not like a usurper, but like an inevitability. Crowds understand momentum. So do regiments. Every coup pretends to be a coronation. Every coronation keeps a dagger in its train. What most people call luck is usually literacy and timing. She could read the city's breath and knew when to speak. There's a redder room waiting if you keep walking. Stone lid, jade grin, and a dust that stains your breath. The chamber is quiet on purpose. No inscriptions, no headlines. Just offerings that still look freshly placed if you refuse to blink. Jade is the color of breath held long enough to cross a river of knives. The mask is not vanity, it's insurance. The face you keep when the body starts telling other stories. Jaguar skin whispers under bone. Obsidian and shell keep a prayer's edge sharpened. Here the world admits what it usually hides. Some people are buried as passages, not as endings. You reach for names because names make you feel less lost. The tomb refuses you. It offers symbol instead, cinnabar like sunrise, shell like surf, bone needles like signatures you're not trained to read. You accept the bargain because depth often disguises itself as silence. Maybe she was a queen, maybe she was the person everyone asked permission from without realizing they were asking. Power can be a voice, it can also be the pause others fall into. The lesson is humility. If your alphabet can't explain a greatness, your alphabet is the one that needs editing. Back into daylight, and the paint is still wet. A young woman with a body rebuilt in metal and will refuses to be framed by pity or fashion. She doesn't blur the line between real and unreal. She draws it with surgical steadiness and then paints both sides. There's blood, yes, and pain, yes, and 1,000 little dials of humiliation turned down to the exact volume that keeps you functional. But there is also costume, a banner carried at chest height, a choice to dress like a nation and walk barefaced into a century that wanted souvenirs instead of witnesses. She gives them neither. She gives them instruction disguised as color. History is full of women who had to build their own stages and fight their own ushers. Some used ritual and rumor, and snakes that may or may not have curled where the poets insisted. Some used letters that were more accurate than armies at measuring loyalty. Some used paint and spectacle. The thread between them isn't scandal, it's precision. Watch how they pick their moment, how they never reach for a blade or a brush unless timing is already on their side. Watch how often their enemies mistake audacity for accident and are corrected by the outcome. Now listen, hear stone hum under sandals and the roofless geometry of an old city refuse to be called a ruin. Rooms fold into rooms like ideas into ideas. Corridors double back as if they're rereading themselves. Bulls leap forever on a wall where paint does not believe in gravity. You think you're lost. You are only being educated by architecture. This place was not designed for your convenience. It was built to teach. The straight line is a superstition. Order is a spiral. Ritual is movement rehearsed until it looks like certainty. The palace pretends to be a maze, or the maze pretends to be a palace. Either way, the lesson stands. You can spend your life hunting a monster someone swore lived at the center, or you can learn to read the building and find out the center is everywhere the light falls. The double axe repeats until you stop calling it decoration and start calling it language. The horns appear on rooftops like punctuation. You do not decode so much as you surrender to a grammar that never needed your alphabet. Meaning here is choreography, understanding, a practiced turn. Not far away in calendar time, those centuries for the shoe leather, a scaffolding creaks and a beam swings through the air like a sentence with a hard period. Men shove, chant, shelter. The ram slams. The wall coughs dust and dignity. The city has a while yet, but it felt the future in that one blow. Artillery is simply arithmetic that joined a choir. If you can throw far enough, if you can stand fire long enough, if you can calculate high enough, a wall becomes a suggestion. A counterweight drops, and you hear mathematics sing. But no engine, no matter how spectacular, ever won a siege alone. What breaks cities is not the first stone but the thousandth that nobody bothers to watch. It's the boredom, the bargaining, the kitchen rumor that becomes policy because no one felt like contradicting it. War is logistics. Peace is also logistics. The trebuchet is dramatic. The ledgers decide. Ask any quartermaster. Ask any mayor who forgot to salt enough meat before winter. Ask any commander who thought fear could feed troops. History prefers loud victories and quiet causes. Believing only the first is how cities die twice. So what do we do with the procession? Plague bell mornings, mirrored coronations, crimson tombs, painted spines, serpent queens, labyrinths that move even when they stand still, towers that roll like mountains on wheels. We do not file them by century and lock the drawer. We line them up and listen for the common rhythm. This is the rhythm. Invention in the service of survival, spectacle as a weapon, and story as the map everyone actually follows. When the gear and the ritual and the narrative align, a city can outlive its architects. If you want the pattern, follow the grain of the tools. The peasant's wooden hoe, the empress's careful handwriting, the mason's straight edge, the painter's brace, the engineer's rope. All of them insist on pressure applied exactly where something will yield. Nobody in these rooms wastes force. They study the hinge of things. When they push, the door does not merely open, it remembers them. Technique is character made visible. A civilization's most revealing portrait is often its tool rack. Consider hunger. In the village, hunger is a calendar. In the palace, it is strategy. In the temple, it is a ritual fast. In the siege camp, it is a weapon that cleanse up after loud machines. People who understand hunger start revolutions and end them, crash dynasties and crown teenagers, cut stones into laws and laws into loopholes. If a story doesn't mention hunger, it is not a story of how a world actually moved. If a policy does not respect hunger, it will meet it at the gate in a season or two with more regret than bread. Consider names. Sophie becomes Catherine, Myrtle becomes Olympia's, kings become headlines, artisans become anonymous. The nameless woman in red becomes a queen because someone spent a lifetime arranging the silence around her. Names defend, names betray, names are the first and last propaganda. Take away a name and you don't just delete a person, you edit the entire chapter they were supposed to anchor. Give someone a name large enough and strangers volunteer to carry it. The wise ruler engraves names where rain can't touch them and gossip can't quite rewrite them. Consider rooms. The single-room hut where every breath fogs the same dark. The council chamber where courtiers measure each other by how slowly they blink. The hidden crypt where jade faces keep secrets longer than empires last. The studio lit by pain and stubbornness. The palace that folds the horizon into its stairways. The siege tower that makes a straight path out of the air. Every room changes what power looks like, because every room changes what is possible to say without moving your mouth. Here's a truth you can test tomorrow. The past does not sit behind us. It stands to our left and right, crowding the periphery, waiting to advise or ambush. When you feel watched, it's not paranoia. It's precedent checking your math. That's not mystical. That's how human beings carry instruction, on signs, in rituals, in a way of leaning when a lie is about to land. You don't need a prophet. You need a ledger and a memory that refuses to be flattered by novelty. Pull closer to the heat. A royal couple argues in the language of omens. A general counts ladders instead of casualties. A midwife unties a knot because an old belief says a knot confuses a child about exits. In one century, a gate is sacred. In the next, it is a liability. In the next, it is ceremonial again because canons have rendered it symbolic. Advancement is not a staircase. It is a courtyard people cross and recross, carrying different burdens in different generations, but wearing down the same stones into instruction. Meanwhile, somebody writes, and the writing outlives the reason it was dangerous. Somebody paints, and a century later the colors become a country. Somebody murders, and it looks like policy. Somebody loves, and it looks like a treaty. Somebody gets hungry, and it looks like history beginning again with a new flag over the same arithmetic. The trick isn't to be cynical, it's to be awake. Cynicism and sleep are cousins. Wakefulness is a discipline with receipts. You can measure a society by what it fears enough to ritualize. One city perfects the art of washing its hands from a distance because water lies. Another simulates flight on a fresco because the sea has already taught them how to trust balance and bravery at once. Another builds a wall and then stores its food somewhere the wall cannot defend because habit hums louder than engineering. Another hoists a counterweight and teaches gravity to speak in siege. Fear decides budgets, budgets decide myths. The instrument changes, the instruction repeats. When power wants to look inevitable, it borrows the language of the sacred, incense, procession, myth. When resistance wants to look righteous, it borrows the language of the family, bread, hunger, burial. When art wants to look immortal, it borrows the language of the wound, scars, mending, the confession that refuses audience but permits witness. You've seen these costumes worn by different actors. You will see them again. Costuming is not deception, it is translation for crowds. Pause long enough to hear the thin music behind the spectacle. A monk counts days by bells and turns them into an empire of habit. An empress counts officers and turns them into a coup that calls itself stability. A queen mother counts enemies and turns them into a sermon about destiny. An artist counts vertebrae and turns them into a hymn you can hang on a wall. An engineer counts rotations and turns them into a math lesson the city cannot ignore. Counting is not cold. It's the only way some people can stay warm. There is a danger in the labyrinth that no hero warns you about. You can mistake complexity for wisdom. The palace is complicated because it was built by many hands over many seasons, not because it is smarter than you. The crypt is silent because stone does not gossip, not because it knows more. The throne room is impressive because it is designed to make your neck bend. Resist flattery. The truth is usually straight-spined and within reach, like a handle you didn't notice because you were busy admiring the door. There is another danger in the siege that no commander writes about. Victory teaches you less than logistics do. You can throw a stone and cheer. You cannot cheat a ledger. You recover faster from failing spectacularly than from planning sloppily. Cities fall when people stop arguing about the details they're tired of repeating. The future collapses at the point where someone says, "We'll figure that out later." Later is a wall that never learned to stand. Let's circle back, through straw and smoke and scandal, to the older question that sits under all the others. What lasts? Not comfort, not glory, not fear. Technique lasts. Ritual lasts. Story lasts. A hoe still cuts a line into earth the way it did when the last frost was a superstition and a sermon. A procession still organizes attention better than a memo. A good story still installs itself in your memory without asking. Technique, ritual, story, that is civilization's triple braid rope. Pull on it and watch old doors cooperate. This is the part where I ask you to do something, and I won't waste it on autopilot. Choose your thread and pull. If the jade mask whispered to you, drop one word, red, and tell me the smallest ritual you keep that nobody taught you. If the double axe and horned roofs are still flickering at the edge of your vision, type horn and design a room in 10 words that would make you braver. If the trebuchet's arc felt like poetry written by gravity, comment ash and describe what you've seen fall and not break you. Then take the simplest civic oath we have together. Subscribe so you never step out of the corridor alone. Ring the notification bell so the next door opens for you the moment we unlock it, and bring a friend who argues well. We open a new adventure every day. Help choose tomorrow's route by leaving the first question you want us to chase in the comments. If this helped you see an old story differently, tap the like so the algorithm learns to carry a torch instead of a pitchfork. We keep moving. Because this corridor doesn't end, it braids into others. Here comes a funeral that doubles as a press release. Here comes a wedding that doubles as a war. Here comes an oath that is really a budget. You can tell the truth about anything if you start with the receipts and follow them through the ritual into the rumor. Don't start with what people said they meant. Start with what had to be delivered by noon. Accountability is the only incense that clears a room. If you want a compass, it's simple. Follow scarcity, follow spectacle, follow the story that will not shut up. Scarcity shows you the hinge, spectacle shows you the door, story shows you who owns the keys. And yes, keys change hands. That's why you don't worship the doorkeeper. You pay attention to the locksmith. People who learn the locksmith's craft never panic in a crowd because they know which sound is the bolt and which is the rumor. Notice the instruments of persuasion as carefully as you once noticed weapons. A window is an instrument. A balcony is an instrument. A public fountain is an instrument. a paint color, a uniform cut, a staircase that makes you climb in single file. These persuade without a single sentence. Tyrants hire architects with better instincts than poets. Reformers recruit choirs for their breadth and accountants for their accuracy. Pay attention to who sits where and how the doors swing. Architecture is often the argument that never has to raise its voice. Consider the ways bodies were made into theaters. A woman turns illness into iconography. A queen mother turns motherhood into jurisprudence. A dancer turns a bull into a calendar. A soldier turns arithmetic into awe. A peasant turns survival into instruction. That last one should humble us. Watch people who live accurately with very little. They are often better at politics than those who write books about it. They know exactly where the hinge is, because their knuckles, remember, while we're here, do the boring audit that changes lives. Who benefits when a city believes a monster waits in the maze? Who benefits when a court believes a god slid into a womb along a thunderbolt? Who benefits when engineers receive more poems than farmers? Who benefits when markets call hunger a choice? Curiosity is not cynicism, it is maintenance. Your civilization needs tune-ups more than triumphs. Most collapses are preventable. Most miracles are scheduled deliveries that somebody bothered to plan. Put a palm on this wall. Feel it vibrating? That's not mysticism, that's the combined frequency of decisions. Some hasty, some brutal, some generous, some wise. It is very hard to ruin a world all at once. It is very easy to erode it with a shrug every afternoon. The people who preserved anything you loved did it by refusing to shrug when it was fashionable. They argued. They were annoying. They used the right names at the right time and wrote them down where mold could not eat them. Now, invert the map. Stop reading forward. Read downward. Not chronology. Strata. In the layer where water was ambition, cities wore harbors like crowns. In the layer where fire was argument, engines wrote their thesis across walls. In the layer where wind was rumor, flags told you more than speeches. In the layer where earth was oath, foundations were the most honest sentences anyone ever wrote. In all layers, gravity was accountability. Defy it at your peril. Harness it, and you can move stones without lying to yourself about the price. You have heard it said that history repeats. That's lazy. History practices. It keeps muscle memory of how crowds pivot, how palaces purge, how markets starve, how artists smuggle truths past guards by making them beautiful. When something comes back, it is usually because the rehearsal never stopped. Watch for the warm-ups no one notices. Watch for the old choreography in new uniforms. If you can spot the count-in, you can change the song. If you prefer heroes, keep them complicated. The hunter of monsters needed directions from a woman. The conqueror needed letters from his mother. The empress needed indignation bent into law. The painter needed pain shined until it reflected more than itself. None of them were alone, and none of them were tidy. Admiration is healthy as long as it never demands amnesia. Demand footnotes with your applause. And if you prefer monsters, keep them literal long enough to be useful. A beast in a maze is a great story until you realize it is sometimes a landlord with good lawyers. A plague is a divine punishment until you build a latrine and lower the rate of miracles. A witch is an enemy of order until you count how many men the accusation keeps employed. Demystify at noon, re-enchant at dusk. Both are duties. The balance keeps you sane and your neighbors safer. Return again to the red room because we're not done with it. Imagine the hands that carried the powder, the lungs that inhaled the day's measure of poison in the name of reverence. Imagine the conversation that reduced a lifetime into a mask's width and decided that was not erasure but elevation. If that sounds cruel, welcome to how beauty is often purchased. If it sounds sacred, notice how carefully the living laid the offerings. Contradiction is not a flaw in ceremony. It is its engine. The world runs on reconciled opposites. Return again to the siege, because we're not done with it either. Somewhere a crew is inching a tower across mud, soaked leathers smoking slightly under a rain of sparks. Somewhere a tunnel gasps and rolls a section of wall like a shoulder popping out of its joint. Somewhere, most dangerously for the city, a baker looks at the flour and decides which rumor will be cheapest to believe tomorrow. Machines terrify, shortages decide. If you want to be brave, learn how to count and share. Return again to the painter who refused to be absorbed by anyone's manifesto. Remember how she wore her country the way most people wear armor, and how she smiled like a blade that cuts the rope of your excuses. The admiration she drew was equal parts honest and lazy. Some loved the image more than the labor. Don't make that mistake. If you want to honor a maker, change how you look, not just what you post. Seeing is a craft. Return again to the Empress who understood letters like tactics. She knew that to rule is to edit. Excess rumors deleted, useful myths italicized, villains pushed to footnotes, your name moved from the margin to the header. That is not deceit, that is curation. Every government is an anthology with a bias. The moral variable is whether the index tells the truth. If you are going to write power, take your verbs seriously. Return again to the serpents and rights, to a queen who learned that reverence without enforcement is merely a hobby. She did not have the option of being gentle and surviving. We don't have to admire the cruelty to acknowledge the calculus. If you want thrones to be kinder, build institutions that make mercy cheaper than murder. Until then, snakes have work. Piety without policy is stationary theater. Return again to the village where nothing is romantic. The mattress is a sack, the street a throat, the morning a command. It will try to teach you humility before you perfect contempt. Learn the right lesson. Contempt is a cheap disguise for fear. Humility is an instrument, the only one that lets you hear instructions you didn't write. Say thank you to the ancestor who figured out which herbs help, to the neighbor who knew which windows to avoid, to the child who learned to carry water without spilling more than they drank. We are nearing the far door, and the corridor is being honest. Nothing we touched is tidy, and nothing we admired is innocent. That does not ruin the beauty, it sharpens it. You do not love a civilization by pretending its hands were clean. You love it by learning where it hid the soap, who boiled the water, and how many people were burned carrying the pot. That knowledge doesn't sour reverence, it makes reverence grow up. So take what you can carry without dropping it. Take the lesson that names are tools, not idols. Take the memory that rituals domesticate fear. Take the certainty that story is both weapon and medicine, and that you should ask for whom before approving the dose. Take the suspicion that logistics are the school where destiny quietly learns to write in block letters. Take the discipline to count, to argue, to notice door hinges, to watch who refills the lamps after processions are over. Take a friend with you who disagrees and will keep you honest. When someone tells you to pick a side between wonder and skepticism, refuse. Carry both and make them behave. Wonder without skepticism is a cult. Skepticism without wonder is a cage. The palace needs both. The siege camp needs both. The studio needs both. The village absolutely needs both because the margin for error is small and the cost of certainty is usually funerals. The grown-ups in the room are the ones who can hold contradictions without dropping the bait. If you have listened this far, you are part of the conspiracy that keeps complexity alive. Use it. Build rooms that produce courage. Write letters that change schedules. Paint until your pain becomes instructions. Cook until hunger turns back into a calendar you can manage. Engineer until gravity recites poetry. Bury your dead like passages, not endpoints. And remember that the simplest test of whether a story deserves to survive is whether it helps a stranger breathe easier while carrying their next load. One more thing before we open the door. To anyone who insists the past is a museum of finished mistakes, hand them a broom and a ledger. Let them spend a week where water is heavy and rumor is a currency. Let them watch a machine built 1,000 years ago move a crowd today because the proportion still feels right. Then ask them again whether history is done with us or we are done with history. The honest ones will stay to help clean. If you know one, tag them and make this our gathering place. The door is here. It is not locked. It is heavy because the hinge is old, not because it wants to keep you out. Put your shoulder to it. Feel the give. Listen to the corridor exhale behind us. Not a goodbye, only a recalibration. Every room we entered is still working on you, and you are working on it in ways you will not see for a while. Our work doesn't end at thresholds, it multiplies beyond them. Walk out carrying 3 tools: attention, appetite, and accountability. Attention to spot the thread that could become a rope. Appetite to feed the long work instead of the quick applause. Accountability to keep gravity honest. With those, you can cross a city where the fountains are arguments and the markets are choirs. With those, you can survive a palace without becoming furniture. With those, you can live through a siege and remember how to plant afterward. With those, and with the bell you rang so you never miss the next opening, we meet again on the far side of the next threshold. And when someone asks what you found inside the straw, the jade, the paint, the horns, the letters, the engines, tell them you didn't find a monster, you found a method. Tell them the real labyrinth was not under the palace. It was in the way we arrange our attention. Tell them the real siege weapon was not the trebuchet. It was patience attached to purpose. Tell them the real crown was not on anyone's head. It was in the consent of people who were tired of hunger and ready to practice a better arithmetic. Then tell them where to meet us next. Before you step through, glance back along the corridor and notice what changed. Not the stones, but your stance. You now carry names like tools, not trophies. You test ceremonies for their uses. You question walls for doors. That is the curriculum we smuggled into your pockets. Maps made of receipts, songs that double as checklists, myths that admit their authors. If you felt that shift, tell me which room rearranged your pulse and why. Your answer will chart our next expedition and keep this circle honest. Share this episode with one curious friend and challenge them to choose boldly and well. Then hand them a thread. Tell them to choose red, horn, or ash and pull. We've left enough doors ajar. The corridors are listening.